Hello, everyone, and I hope you're all well. My name is Tanner Dagenais, and I'm the host of Self-Sabotage Solutions. On this podcast, it's my opportunity and my pleasure to be able to share everything I know about self-sabotage so that you can overcome self-sabotage in your life. Now, today I'm going to be talking to you about something that's really important to be practicing if you want to overcome self-sabotage, because the very act of it itself can be self-sabotage and can lead to more self-sabotage. And what I'm talking about is self-compassion. So whenever you do self-sabotage, whenever you make a mistake, whenever you may not do something that's the greatest, you need to show yourself compassion. So many of us are great at showing compassion to others when they make a mistake, like our friends or family or loved ones. But when it comes to ourselves, we're our own worst critic. We attack ourselves and beat ourselves down. And this is one of the biggest forms of self-sabotage, because that negative self-talk can really turn into a cycle where we start to believe that we are not good enough. We start to believe that we're stupid, that we made a mistake, that we just make mistakes in general, and it can be very hard to get out of self-sabotaging behaviors if you are being very highly self-critical, and not showing yourself any compassion. So I think it's really important that we do show ourselves compassion, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, I think there's a big difference between self-compassion and self-esteem, and usually those two things are very are confused sometimes. So I wanted to touch a bit on them and really talk about why they the difference between the two. So self-esteem is really based on like what your self-worth is, like what your image of yourself is and things like that. And they do kind of correlate a bit, but self-compassion is based on how you treat yourself. So they can be completely different, where you may think of yourself highly, but you may beat yourself down, even if you're doing that. And I think usually if you have bad self-compassion, usually your self-esteem won't be very high either, right? Because they're usually pretty correlated, but they're not quite the same thing. So I did want to touch base on that. So this increasing your self-compassion and loving yourself more and showing yourself more kindness when you do make a mistake can actually boost your self-esteem, because remember, like that cycle I was talking about just at the very beginning of this, where when you are very highly critical of yourself and you beat yourself up and attack yourself, you can actually start to believe those things. And those things can lower your self-esteem, where maybe you don't believe in yourself anymore. Maybe you don't believe that you have the ability to do these things. Maybe you believe that you're not good enough anymore. Maybe you believe that you're just a failure at life, right? And that's the kind of thing that self-compassion can really help a lot with, and it can help break that cycle so that you're not continuing to go down farther and farther, and breaking your beliefs about yourself. Um, so self-compassion is really, really important when overcoming self-sabotage, because uh, probably one of the major parts of self-sabotage is that negative self-talk. Is that negative self-talk and criticism, where you do beat yourself up. You say you're not good enough. You say you're a fool. You say, I made a I'm always failing. I'm not good enough. I'm not able to do this. I don't have enough experience. And that was something I used to always do to myself. I think I've talked about this before in my podcast, on previous episodes, but there was a story of me with public speaking. And I think a lot of people have the same exact experience as I did, but I was always that kid who was scared of publicly speaking. You wouldn't be able to tell it now since I'm doing my own podcast, but and I'll tell you how I started that pod. The reason why I decided to start doing my podcast, because it wasn't my own idea. Because I just didn't have that belief in myself. I didn't think I was good enough to do it. I didn't think I could enjoy publicly speaking, because I had beaten myself up at over my past public speaking experiences. I wasn't showing myself self-compassion. So that, I think that was really important. But I was always that kid who was sweaty, who was nervous, who was stuttering words, who would start to say and there and things like that all the time, like very, very frequently, or whatever pause filler word you want to put in there. That was me always doing that. And I didn't think I would be able to be doing a podcast or hosting a podcast and speaking like this on my own, in front and releasing it to the world. I would never have thought that was possible back in the day. And luckily, my wife, she encouraged me to start a podcast. And I remember the first time um, I thought about doing it, and I just told myself, no, that's not me. I don't like to do that. And then my wife told me I should do it, and I didn't listen to her the very first time, I remember. And then the thought came up again to me, and I think that was, my inner self trying to tell me you should do this podcast, you should start this, because it was a good thing for me to grow, and to help other people. And that's really why I started the podcast, is so I can myself can grow and help as many people as possible. And that was really important to me. But just goes to show you that I was literally holding myself back from starting this podcast. And now, before every podcast episode, I'm always talking to myself. I'm always saying, I am good enough. I am an amazing public speaker. I love publicly speaking. I love speaking in front of the camera. I love, doing these podcasts. I can speak at a great tone. I have confidence. I know exactly what I'm going to talk about with this subject, and it's the perfect things are going to come to my mind right away. And many people think that that's kind of a crazy thing to do, but when you start to understand the way the subconscious mind works, and this part of your mind, I'm sure you guys have heard about it, but let's just touch on it a little bit because it's really important to understand the subconscious part of your mind, which you have two different parts of your mind. You have the conscious part of your mind, which has your goals, your aspirations, your dreams. That's your long-term thinking part of your mind. It's the critical thinking part of your mind. This part of your mind, can reject information like, oh, that's not good for me. That's not safe for me. And then there's the subconscious part of your mind. And what you need to know about the subconscious, and the conscious part of your mind only processes about 40 pieces of information per second. And the subconscious part of your mind processes about 11 million pieces of information per second. It's like a supercomputer. And what its main goal is to take in as much data from the environment as possible, and it stores all of it on like a giant hard drive, which is your brain. And what it does is that it takes all this data and it decides what's the safest option for it to do. What's the safest thing for it to do based on what it's heard the most, based on what everyone else is doing. And so, that is a big reason why a lot of us are drawn to this negative self-talk. And we don't show ourselves compassion because, how often is that we see people beating themselves up, attacking themselves? It's pretty frequently that most people usually have that negative self-talk, right? And so when we see it in like movies and TV shows, we see it from our loved ones or family members, we see it, and then we do it to ourselves. That reinforces that fact, and it becomes like a program. And what these programs are is like it's programs that's created from our subconscious mind based on the data it's collected. And these programs are run throughout the day. So, you may have a program for negative self-talk. You may have a program, or you do likely have a program for driving cars. So your subconscious mind knows how to drive the car while you are distracted thinking about work or what you're going to be eating that night or whatever else you're thinking about, singing the song. Um, it's helping you brush your teeth so you don't have to even think about it. You have a program to drive a car, to go to the bathroom. You have a program for everything, good and bad things. And so not all programs are bad, and the subconscious mind is not a bad part of your mind. It just doesn't understand the difference between good and bad. And so this part of your mind, it's just like a record player. Really, what it is. It's a record player that replays things that are the most familiar. And so that's why showing yourself compassion is really important, because if you're attacking yourself, you have the negative self-talk all the time, those negative thoughts are going to start reoccurring. And that's where you get those reoccurring negative thoughts that are, common with depression and things like that, where you always have these negative thoughts come up in your mind. You always are feeling negative. And some people may not feel like they have depression, but those negative thoughts are still plaguing them. They're still coming at them constantly. And one of the ways to start reprogramming yourself, is going to be through repetition, is going to be through hypnosis. And I'll talk more about those in the solutions part of this podcast. So the next thing I want to talk about is really, the importance of self-compassion when you are failing. Because, if you fail at something, that's okay. Failures happen. And really, it's important that we learn from those mistakes, right? But if you're so preoccupied with attacking yourself, with beating yourself down, you may miss out the important, valuable lesson that you were supposed to learn with that failure. So maybe you weren't successful on this attempt, and that's okay. Doesn't mean you should be giving up. Doesn't mean you should be attacking yourself or beating yourself up. Because think about this: if you really want to achieve whatever goal it is, maybe start your own business or start a podcast or something like that. You need to learn from where you have made mistakes, right? Because where we learn from those things, that's how we can start to progress to become better, to become to be able to create that business. Like if you made a mistake and you weren't successful with your first side business, you can continue and like, okay, what did I need to alter this time? Where did I make the mistake, and where next time can I make it so I address that mistake and go forward? Because that is so important. Learning from our mistakes and using that energy that would have been used and that time, that energy and that time, the mental capacity, right? Where we're using those are really valuable resources because, if you use all your energy, your mental capacity, and your time attacking yourself, beating yourself up, being negative, you're not going to be able to use that to focus on the opportunity that you have ahead of you to change, to make differences, to start moving towards your goals, despite the fact that you made a mistake this time, right? And that's where a lot of people make a mistake is that it's kind of like a cycle of mistakes because you first make that first mistake and then you self-sabotage, essentially a cycle of self-sabotage or cycle of mistakes. Then you self-sabotage, and that was a mistake in itself. And then you miss out on the actual opportunity to learn from what had happened. And you're so preoccupied with beating yourself up, with those negative self-talk, that you don't even see why it had happened. You just think that you weren't good enough, that it was all your fault, that you just weren't meant to do this. When in all reality, maybe the path that you had gone down or the business idea you had just needed to be altered a tiny bit, just needed to have a different point of view. And if you allow yourself to step back and be like, okay, what happened? And this is one of my next point I want to talk about is that conscious awareness, being conscious. So you have your subconscious mind and your conscious mind, right? You want to use that conscious part of your mind. And that's the most amazing thing about one of the most amazing things about being human is that we can be consciously aware. We can be consciously aware of what we're doing and determine, is this good or bad? But the problem is most people are operating from their subconscious mind about 95% of their daily thoughts and actions. So if you're constantly operating from your subconscious mind, the part of your mind that can't tell the difference between good and bad, that's not logical thinking, it's just constantly recording, then what you're going to be doing is, just doing what everyone else, what you've seen in the environment, what you've seen in your past life, what you've seen, when you were a child, what you've encountered the most often. And a lot of the times that's going to be something that oftentimes we just don't want to be mimicking because we are imitative learners. So you need to start being more conscious, take that 95% and make it smaller and increase the amount that you are conscious. And you can start to do that just by when a thought comes through your head, ask yourself a question, take a deep breath in, deep breath out, and think about it. Was that a good thought? Was that a thought that's going to help me move towards my life or away from it? Start to be more aware of it. You can do this also by journaling if you are able to remember what had happened. But I think it can be very easy just in the moment, ask yourself what had happened. Or, once you actually are able to consciously think about it and get out of your programming to think about, okay, what did I just do? Why did I do that? Was that going to be bringing me towards the life I want or away from the life I want, right? And that's where a lot of your power, that's where you can start to really address the root causes of your self-sabotage. Because if you can figure out why you chose to do something that was self-sabotage, that can make a big difference in your life. And there are ways to really figure it out if you're having troubles, like through hypnosis regressions and meditation and journaling and things like that. So I think, first attempt just to be more aware throughout the day, right? It'd be great if you want to start a journal. It'd be great if you want to start looking into hypnosis techniques and things like that. And we'll talk some more about that. but yeah, that's so important, is to just use your resources wisely. Use them to build up yourself and not beat yourself down. Okay. So really what we want to talk what I want to talk about is some of the solutions. I think we covered pretty much everything I want to talk about with why self-compassion is important, how it interacts with self-sabotage. So the next thing that you want to start to think about is how can you start to reprogram your subconscious mind, right? Remove those bad programs and start to put in new programs that support positive self-talk, that support loving yourself and treating yourself correctly. Uh, Part of it can just be conscious awareness. Like when you do catch yourself saying something negative, remember, don't beat yourself up for it. It's okay. You noticed it. So say congratulations to yourself. That's awesome. You noticed it. Accept that those negative thoughts came through. Accept that they're likely not from you. They're likely from the environment, from your surroundings, from the TV shows you watch, from the movies, from your friends, from teachers, from society, from maybe your parents, and realize that you can change them. And then you can even do the replacement technique, or the delete technique, or the substitution technique. There's many different techniques you can do. Um, Really, the substitution technique, what that is just when a negative thought comes into your head, you just replace it with something else. You say accept it, and then you say, okay, well, I said I was not good enough, but now I'm going to say I am good enough, and I'm going to find a way to make this work. I'm going to learn from this mistake and make myself better in the process, right? There's the delete technique, which is a pretty favorite of mine because I like to use it a lot. So is my wife, and it's kind of fun. It can be pretty fun because what it is when you have those negative thoughts and you accept that they're there. I think accepting those negative thoughts in the first place is important. Don't just reject them, but realize that they're there for a reason, right? They're there because your subconscious mind has seen something enough times that that thought is what it considers safe. And I know that sounds silly because how could those negative thoughts be safe? But the subconscious mind, part of your mind, is not logical. Remember, it's kind of like a little kid. It'll just kind of repeat what it hears, even if it's not a good thing. That's why you got to be careful around kids, because they really is the reason why you have to be careful around kids, right? Is because kids, their subconscious minds are in hyperdrive, and pretty much how we know that is that their brains are constantly in a theta state, and theta state is known for hypnosis. And what hypnosis is pretty much is a way that you can speak to the subconscious mind and reprogram it much faster. So there's ways to get your mind into that theta state. But let's dive on the delete technique. So the delete technique, it uses emotion, it uses visualization, and it uses visualization, which is really important because that affects the subconscious mind, and so does emotion. So what you need to do is you need to accept that negative thought was there. Now imagine like a computer screen, like the one you're watching on, or maybe even your phone, if that works better for you, if you don't usually use a computer. And imagine you're on like Word, or you're typing in a text message, or whatever suits your fancy here. And you see that phrase written out. You see it written out in front of you, like in the text message or on Microsoft Word. And there's that line afterwards that's flashing and blinking, and it's saying, what do we do next? It's waiting for your command. It's saying, are you going to continue writing? Are you going to delete me? Are you going to finish right here? And of course, what we're doing, right, is called the delete technique. So you're going to be deleting it. And you can imagine the delete button is glowing red. It's gigantic. It's calling your name. It could be whispering to you. It can be like, Tanner, press me, right? And make it fun. You want to kind of, add that excitement. You want to add that emotion. You want to add that visualization and make it more real, because the more real it seems, that visualization, that emotion really highly impact the subconscious mind. That's why TV shows, that's why the TV and movies and things like that can be so important, so impactful to us. That's why highly traumatic events can really affect us in life. So once you visualize that and let yourself feel that emotion of that being there. Hit that delete button, feel it, just watch it disappear in front of your eyes. Watch it disappear and feel that release. Feel that, you know, feel that release, feel that freedom that you have just gained. And then that line is still there waiting for your next command. Now you can go in and add the substitution technique. So when I learned this, it was just the delete technique. And I think it was, the book was The Power of the Subconscious Mind. I think it's by, oh man, I'm trying to think of who it's by. I have the book behind me someplace, but I can always put that in the description down below if you guys are interested what book that was. So I learned the delete technique there, and they didn't actually touch on the next part of what I'm going to talk about, but I thought adding on the next part would make it even a better technique. So I call it the delete and creation technique, because after you delete it, now you have the open canvas. Now you have an open screen. Now you have an open Microsoft Word document. Now you have an open text message that you can go ahead and create what you want to put in there instead. So if your negative comment was, I'm a failure, you delete it, you accept it, you delete it, you feel that release, you watch it disappear from your screen. Then you have that open line. You type in something new, like I am learning from my mistakes, and I'm going to be my best self. I'm going to continue striving until I achieve my goal of creating my business, of, gaining more muscle, of eating healthier. And that's really what it is about, is to, use your words to empower yourself instead of beat yourself down and hold yourself back, because that's self-sabotage, right? So use that. I think the delete technique and the delete/creation technique is a really good one. And really you can make any kind of technique you want. I even heard someone who posted on my podcast and one of my YouTube comments told me about one of their techniques, which I thought was really interesting. He always imagines, I guess, that there's black slugs, or no, sorry, not black slugs, black sludge in their mouth, and they imagine they have these jars, like mason jars, and they throw up the black sludge into the mason jar, and that black sludge is like the negative words. So they have negative word vomit out of their mouth. It's kind of gross, but at the same time, he said that it worked really well for him. And then he puts on the mason jar, screws it up, and gets rid of it. Right? That's awesome. That's exactly what you can do. You can make up any of your other techniques if you want. Just you have to use imagination and use that emotion and feel that release. Like, I'd have to imagine after you got that black sludge out, you'd have to feel pretty good and like pretty relieved that you just got that stuff out of your body, right? I made another technique based on the Harry Potter movie, because my wife, she's a really big Harry Potter fan, and so the Patronus charm. If for everyone who's not a Harry Potter fan, I'll explain it a little bit. There's these black hooded figures called the mentors in Harry Potter, and these black hooded figures are kind of like some kind of monster, and really what they do is like pretty much it's like a ghost that has a black hooded figure on it, and they come up and they actually can suck out your good memories. They can suck out your good memories. They can suck out your positivity, and they can make you feel cold and dead inside, really, and they can actually kill you at a certain point. And I thought this was a really good analogy and a good way to add in another subconscious technique to address these negative thoughts and to bring more self-compassion to your life, is to because really, what are these negative thoughts doing? It's a lot like what a dementor does. It sucks out your energy. It sucks out your belief in yourself. And at a certain point, if you are so negative, I really do think it can kill you at some point. Which I know for some people might think is a bit extreme, but I think it really can. It can lead you to a very negative spot, and you can go into that depression point. And you can, people who have depression have those very extreme negative thoughts, and at some point they do just want to end it, right? So they're a lot like a dementor in a way. And so what the protection spell, because they're in Harry Potter, they're wizards. or sorcerers, and they have magic with wands and stuff. And so, what the protection spell is against these dementors is called a Patronus. And the Patronus charm is really what it is that they think of like the most happy memory that they have in their life. The you can think about whatever, everyone's memory is going to be different, right? It can be a special time with your loved one. It could be marriage with your significant other. For me, before my son was born, it was marriage with my wife. But after that, it was our experience where we had my son and my wife and my dog Sadie, and we were all there happy together. That was probably one of my happiest moments in my life. And so that's what I like to think of when I do this technique. And so you think of that and you let that feeling build up inside you, that just good tingly feeling, right? You let it build up inside you, and then you say Patronus, and you let it all out of you. And that, you can imagine, that's going to be your spirit. Essentially what it is the Patronus comes out as your spirit animal. So I think Harry Potter's is a stag or something. So your spirit animal could be whatever you think it is. It can be a panda. It can be a frog. It can be, it can be a Komodo dragon, whatever it is, right? It can come out and then it attacks the Dementor and fights it off. So whenever you're having those negative thoughts, and let's say you're having a hard time getting rid of them, use this Patronus method. Think of the most positive thing you can think of. Let that feeling build up inside you. Really let yourself feel that feeling. Imagine that you are there in that moment. Feel what it was like, what the temperature was like, what the time of day it was. Really get yourself back into that moment. Imagine if you were feeling touched. Were you getting touched on the arm? Was there crying? What was happening at that time? Was the warm sun on you? What was the experience that you were feeling? And get yourself into that moment to really relive it, and then get that feeling and use it all to fight off that negativity. And watch your spirit animal go and attack it. And imagine it's a giant cloaked figure, and it fights off, and the black figure flies away or runs away. That could be another method that you can use for the Patronus charm. And like I said, anything that you can come up with that uses emotion and visualization can work to address negative thoughts. So, get out. If you're creative, you can make your own. I would love to hear if you guys do have your own method, or if you are going to create your own method. If you come up with one, please send me that comment. I'd love to be able to share it with other people, because these methods, some people may not gravitate to like the Harry Potter one, or gravitate to the deletion technique. There might be different ones that will work better for them. So if you have any ideas, send them my way. I'd love to share them with other people. I'd love to hear them. I'm always fascinated in hearing people's creative ideas for making these. So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that one about the black sludge too. I'm having trouble remember who the name of that listener was who posted that on YouTube, but appreciate you sharing that. And so, yeah, that is really so important, right? Because using these different techniques, using the visualization, using the emotion to start to overcome that negativity. Okay, so then some next steps you can take. There's going to be, have you ever heard of affirmations? Affirmations, I'm sure most people have heard of them. It's pretty much saying good things to yourself. So surprise, surprise, if you're trying to increase your self-compassion, then you'd probably want to say good things to yourself, right? And there's a lot of things people don't know about affirmations. And I think it's really important that you know as much about affirmations as possible, because if you're going to be practicing affirmations, you want to make sure you're doing it correctly. You want to make sure you're giving your subconscious mind the proper information, though, so that it will intake it in the best way possible. So I'll touch briefly on some of the points on it, but if you want to really hear, a full podcast worth about affirmations, I'll put the link below, or in the description down below, so you guys can watch that video, because I did a whole video talking about affirmations. So that way you guys can have all this different text. But there's a couple of things. You want to avoid negatives. So avoid saying, I'm not fat, I'm not a failure, I'm not this, whatever. You want to focus on the positives instead. So avoid, negating the negatives, because that doesn't do anything. Your subconscious mind is still hearing those negative comments. So you want to focus on the positive and say, I am learning every day. I am learning from my mistakes. I am achieving my goal, and I'm going to continue no matter what happens, right? You want to continue, and you want to build yourself up with those things and focus on the positive, because the more positivity you focus on, the more those become programs. And really, you can think about the programs, and another way you can think about those programs is, nature will always follow the path of least resistance. What the path of least resistance is for our subconscious mind is whatever is the most common. So whatever is the most common to you, that's why repetition is really important. That's why repetition is a great way to reprogram your mind. And that's also why, people learn through repetition, because it impacts the subconscious mind and it creates a program for it. So, practice those affirmations. Once you've learned and created your affirmations, an awesome technique you can do that involves the theta state or the hypnosis state is you can actually record these. So, you can do it on your phone, you can do it however you want to do it, but just record yourself saying these affirmations. And then when you are going to bed, when you are waking up, you can play these, and you can play them throughout the day, like in the car or whatever too. I highly recommend doing that to listen to most music, because most music unfortunately does have a lot of negative messaging in them once you start to be more conscious and aware of what's going on. But when you're playing these, when you're going to bed and when you're waking up, your mind's actually passing through different brainwave states as it goes into deep delta wave brainwave state when you're going to sleep, right? And so this one of the brainwave states that passes through on its way to delta is theta, and that is where you can start to reprogram yourself. That's where your subconscious mind is highly susceptible to reprogramming into what is being said. And so really what is hypnosis state? It is really just relaxing, like a relaxing state, a state usually where your eyes are closed or your vision has been broken. It is a state that usually, yeah, you're just really relaxed and you're kind of zoned out. You're not really thinking consciously about anything, as your subconscious mind has taken over completely. So, TV has been proven to put us in this hypnosis state as well. So that's why it's really important you be careful what TV shows, movies, what things you are watching. And just, same thing as social media, I'm sure. Be careful what you are putting into your mind and what you are surrounding yourself with, because that can become your new programs, right? So part of it is removing the negative programs and then building yourself new programs through the different techniques like affirmations, through the delete technique, through the Patronus charm, through the black sludge in a mason jar, through just speaking to yourself positively, through the recordings at night that you play it in the morning or at night. You can do it that way as well, right? And then there's actual hypnosis. So you can actually, work with a certified hypnosis, and they can put you under hypnosis, and they can work through you with subconscious problems. There's recordings online. There's, Marissa Peer is a great place to start if you want to start to look into that kind of stuff. And so that is a great way to start to do it. And I really recommend learning about the subconscious mind. That's what I teach all my clients. I teach them all about the subconscious mind. I teach them all about programs. I teach them all about, the different techniques they can use in their life. I teach them why, they are being influenced in a certain way, why they're taking certain actions in their life, and how they can start to influence themselves every day of their life. And I think that's really important because, compared to like a lot of modern therapies and a lot of coaching, they have them come back for session after session after session. And it's kind of like a thing that doesn't end for the most part. And what my main goal is to make it so you guys can have everything you need within like the first 2 sessions, so that you don't have to come back to me anymore. You have everything you need, just as much as I do at that point. And you can literally take that reprogramming, and that you have that power in your hands. So anytime you need a reprogram, anytime you find yourself, self-sabotaging, once you're more aware, you can realize, hey, this is a technique I can use. I can address this right now. And you can start to overcome that self-sabotage every single part of your day, because once you understand how the subconscious mind works, you understand that there's really no way to get completely away from self-sabotage, because your subconscious mind doesn't filter out what's seen. And unfortunately, right now, with the way society is, there's just a lot of negativity within society once you start to become aware of it. So it's really important that you know these techniques. You can constantly reprogram yourself and make sure you are protecting yourself. And you might still find yourself being drawn to self-sabotage, and then you can use some techniques to counteract it. So these are really a lot of the techniques that you can use, using that emotion, using that visualization. You can use affirmations. You can use things like that. You can start to create vision boards, and that's another one that you can do, where you put up the things that you want in your life. And one of those things could be self-compassion. One of those things could be loving yourself and treating yourself like you would a friend or a loved one, right? So start to show yourself more compassion. Start to use that energy instead of the energy, time, and mental capacity, instead of beating yourself up and using that negative self-talk, to instead build yourself back up. Give yourself the motivation to continue going. Don't let yourself stop at the first sign of a mistake or a failure, right? The true failure is giving up. The true failure is never starting, because you don't have that self-compassion. You don't have that self-esteem. You don't have that self-belief in yourself. So show yourself that compassion, so that way you can boost your self-esteem, so that way you can really overcome self-sabotage. And that is one of the biggest things I remind some of my clients, is that if you are self-sabotaging, don't beat yourself up for it. Because, think about it this way. If you find yourself self-sabotaging and then you attack yourself, you just went into a cycle of self-sabotage, because you just self-sabotaged yourself. Then you self-sabotage yourself by attacking yourself. And then you're likely going to believe in yourself less, or you're going to feel worse, which is more self-sabotage. Is going to lead to another thing of self-sabotage, which you're likely to attack yourself. And it's going to be this continuing cycle of negativity. When all you need to do is break it, is use what you have in your mind now. And I think it's important to note that all of us have the ability to do this, right? There's nothing special about me or anyone else who's able to overcome self-sabotage. It's just understanding the information. It's just understanding, why we are self-sabotaging. It's just understanding and taking back control of our thoughts, and, allowing ourselves to be in that power, and to be confident, and to love ourselves, and to treat ourselves right. Next time you find yourself being negative of yourself, remind yourself that if this was a friend or a loved one, I always say this to my wife, because for me, the positive self-talk has come on a lot easier for me. I did have that a lot of those periods where I was very negative, but once I started to really address these things, it's come on easier for me than my wife. And my wife sometimes, still goes into that negativity, and I remind her, what would you say if this was your sister? What would you say to her in this moment, instead of if it was you? And she always says, well, not what I said. I'm like, well, yeah, right. So treat yourself like you would her, like you would a loved one, right? Because you should love yourself and treat yourself just the same way, because you deserve it. You deserve that love. And there's a reason why you wouldn't tell your sister that, because it's hurtful and it's mean. So don't tell yourself that, because that's just not going to help you in any way or form. And if you start to think about it that way too, it can help you. So anyways, I hope you guys all really enjoyed, and this was helpful for you. If you guys did enjoy this, if you guys did like this, please subscribe. Please give me a like or comment. I know all those things do help boost algorithms so more people can see it. It's really important this information gets out there, because I feel like a lot of people are desperately in need of self-compassion, of overcoming self-sabotage, because it's so high and highly common in society today. And remember, you can overcome self-sabotage. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what you have experienced in life, your age, your sex, your race. It doesn't matter any of that stuff, right? Where you were born. All that matters is that you start to address, be more consciously aware of your subconscious mind, of your actions, your daily thoughts and actions. Find the root cause of those. Start to change your thinking. Start to address your actions. Start to take steps and techniques to address those negative thoughts, to start to reprogram yourself, and you can really start to be living a much better life throughout that process. So hope you guys all have a fantastic day. Once again, my name is Tanner Dagenet, and I am the host of Self-Sabotage Solutions. It was a pleasure doing this podcast for you guys. Paul, I hope you have a fantastic day, and thank you for listening.